and media studies professor, and I have watched multiple podcasts she was on, multiple videos she was on, and everything. Sharp, funny, really enjoyed her. She should have been a stand-up comedian with the rest of us and given that one a shot. But tonight we're going to talk about virtue hoarders, and I know that second word is a hard one to get out, but it's people just holding on to stuff that they don't really deserve to hold on to. And I heard her in a few different interviews, explained it a few different ways. So she's going to talk first for a little bit. We're going to do a back and forth after that. And please remember your questions at that point. We'll do a Q&A. So I'd like to bring up, folks, Catherine Liu, please. And one more thing before she gets started. If everybody in here buys one of her books and gets them signed later, she will be the ¡1 book in Oklahoma for this month, I will guarantee it. So if that's the motivating factor you need, let's do it.
I need you to be my hype man wherever I go.
There you go.
Is this okay? So I wrote a book about the professional managerial class. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book, I'm just going to explain very briefly what this class is. And then I'm going to go and try some new material on you. So I'm promising the stand-up. But it's very professorial and pedantic at the same time. But I hope it will be entertaining. So the professional managerial class was defined by John and Barbara Ehrenreich as a class of credentialed elites who had taken over liberal and progressive political spaces. They were talking about the Democratic Party of 1977. Today, we can see it in academia, in the liberal media, in the world of NGOs. Now, in around 68, 72, right-wingers also identified this new class because in 1900, credentialed workers in America made up only 3% of the workforce. We had a large number of farmers, larger number of manufacturing workers, and there were very few people who had gone to college and had professional identities. By the late 60s and 70s, in part because of the GI Bill, with people coming back from World War II, being able to go to college, and the expansion of the federal state and the complexity of corporate America, as well as the Cold War's reliance on scientists and defense research, you have this new credentialed elite that is suddenly making up 25% of the labor force. And for the Ehrenreichs, they wrote their essay in 77. Can you hear me still?
Yep.
Okay, because I'm loud. There was this takeover of the Democratic Party and of liberal media by these credentialed elites. So if you think about like journalism, for instance, in the 30s, which was obviously a very, very tumultuous time, America was the Great Depression, people were very poor, you had journalists who didn't necessarily go to college, who were embedded in their local communities, who would apprentice with a newspaper and sort of rise up to the top. Suddenly, you have to go to Columbia School of Journalism to have to try to get a position in one of the major media papers. What happened when journalism became much more credentialed white-collar profession was also that it became much better paid. And this happened throughout the white-collar professions, and the white-collar workers do not... my argument in Virtue Hoarders is they stand in the way of advancement of the working class, even though there are very, very few actual capitalists who own the means of production. But it's this class between the working class and the poor and those very few billionaires and centimillionaires, this 25% of the workforce is actually blocking any kind of real change in America. And this is the thesis of this book. I was writing it thinking about Hillary Clinton's candidacy, the way that the Democratic Party itself rat-fucked Bernie Sanders not once but twice, and they hated him mostly because he appealed to red states like this one. And it behooved them to keep power within the Harvard-educated, Yale-educated elites, from Obama to Timothy Geithner, etc. I, like many people, thought that Obama was a real progressive. It was partially the political betrayals, my own naivete that helped me write this book, but I was always a committed Marxist. And I say this now to Red State, and my girlfriend was like, you need to get out of there now. But I'm like, no, I'm safe. And so I just, one way that I explained the role that this class plays vis-a-vis the powerful is they're like secular priests who justify the divine monarchy. So within the court of the capitalist, they justify the power of the king. So you could say like Obama's cabinet would, or, the hoi polloi around the top elites who are experts around the big donors, around the biggest money people, they justify the decisions of the sovereign. So, for instance, there were a lot of think tanks, allegedly like liberal think tanks around Obama during the first healthcare reform movement. This is after Hillary, who said, oh, we can't have single payer, and here's our all complicated reasons why we can't have it. There is now evidence now that American healthcare is going up exponentially this year, and there was one study done by a real lefty think tank, anti-monopoly think tank, that said if we had single payer today, we could fire all the people that worked in private insurance and pay them a full salary for the next 2 years. And, the people say you can't get raises because of healthcare costs. This is because in 2010, the elites, professors and analysts, economists, doctors, they were in the pockets of big insurance, big pharma, and for-profit hospitals. And we stood in the way of people getting what they needed. So this is background. And now I'm going to give you what I think is a pretty challenging paper that I would love to be able to teach this way with my students. I try to, but 18 to 20-year-olds don't know anything, sorry. So I'm glad to be addressing a kind of older group. I love my students, but they really don't know anything. So, and I try to meet them where they are. So, it's called The Courtier, the Clown, and the Gangster. So one of the most basic relationships in the free market of employment is between worker and boss. In the ideal capitalist scenario, I give of my labor freely to my employer, who compensates me for my time by paying me a living wage. Like, this is the core of liberalism. This is the core of Adam Smith. This is where you have freedom of choice. I choose to work for you or not. Symmetry of power is a fundamental condition of the ideal liberal relationship between worker and employer. In the ideal world, the worker can leave at any time. I can leave at any time. Let's just say I can leave at any time for better wages. Or my wages will go up if I am a loyal and productive worker. Of course, we know this is not how the labor market actually functions. It is to the advantage of the employer that there be a surfeit of workers who have to make a living, who have few choices of employment, especially if they are uncredentialed or allegedly unskilled. And this is why portable health care is a great obstacle to the bosses, because if you can say, I don't want this job anymore, I still have health insurance, you'll have a lot more freedom of choice, which is what allegedly liberals and liberal free marketeers and conservatives want. Desperate people make docile workers. The relationship between bosses and workers is not symmetrical in power. And you know what? This is like the core of Marxist teaching capital. Sorry, anti-Marxist, but it really is that simple. He looks at the worker and boss relationship and he goes, this is not what the free market tells you it is, this relationship. So in Goodfellas, Harry Hill, in a voiceover, describes wage work as the fate of morons, losers, and idiots. I'm paraphrasing. He and his crew of wise guys know how to exploit situations with violence. You know what I'm talking about, right? Goodfellas. Okay, good. I could almost, the losers. The morons. You're a moron if you have to go to work. I grew up in the tri-state area like Trump. I can talk like this. He and his crew of wise guys know how to exploit situations with violence in order to extract protection payments or take a skim on the economic activities of the legal world. This is financial extraction in action. For no work but pure coercion, I, as a boss, am paid. With the degradation of work conditions in the U.S. today, people either with credentials or hustle are trying to avoid the fate of the wage worker. Doge was an attempt to destroy job security for middle-tier PMCs. Sorry. Oh my God. I'm hired. You're hired. The young dozers hired by Musk to downsize the government have known nothing but the brutality of a labor market that allegedly rewards the exceptional and the exceptionally hardworking and throws everyone else out on the street. There's a generational resentment here. For people who are my son's age, for instance, they could ask, who are these people who are expected to while away their days in sleepy bureaucracies, adding to their pensions and planning hobbies to pursue in their retirements? No one should be allowed to live this way, because giving people lifetime employment in a federal government designed to be a check on the animal spirits seems like socialism. If work is for suckers, then everyday life in America is about negotiating a low-trust public environment where everyone is on the take, and the smartest people in the room are the ones who score the biggest takes of all. Trump is an embodiment of this ethos. The centimillionaires feel poor next to the billionaires. Bill Ackman, head of Apollo Capital, once upon a time Jeffrey Epstein, and other hedge fund and private equity money managers have been able to accumulate astonishing amounts of wealth, and they're all great deal makers, but they really don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to work. They make deals. The best deal makers. They can make money from lots of money, and money with nothing but force and coercion, and perhaps even a little blackmail. In the post-war period, professionals and corporate managers, post-World War II period, sorry, I'm old, but enjoyed job security, lifetime employment. They were mostly white men, and they were paid a family wage. Those kinds of jobs are very rare now, and when they exist, they are jealously guarded by brutal gatekeepers of the PMC. We're really good at gatekeeping. Hustle culture influencers, however, like Andrew Tate, tell the young, and especially young men, that there are shortcuts to wealth, and that wage work is for suckers. The small-time criminality of Harry Hill and crew has become the generalized principle of getting over on the system. Something about the employment relationship in the United States is not working. But you can say to me, I'm pretending to be my critic, saying, but at least we're not serfs or slaves. Let's look at what, all right, so we're not serfs, so let's look at what elite work was like for those who labored under the conditions of absolute monarchy. The courtier is the figure in the feudal court who flatters the tyrant with his or her intelligence, mostly his, and uses literacy in a secular manner to secure the power of the monarch. He or she embodied culture, but also submission to power in a secular world. So the courtier was someone who helped manage the king's finances, created plays and art for the king's pleasure. And I was thinking that the manager, the credentialed expert, became the courtier of capitalism. The courtier lived in fear, was often smarter than the monarch, but depended on pleasing him for survival. In the court of the tyrant, especially in Shakespeare, the fool or the clown played an important truth-saying role. Today, clowns and clowning have a different meaning, especially if you live online. But the function of the clown is related to the absolute power of the monarch under feudalism. The clown could be critical of the king as long as he amused him. The clown could perform in carnivalesque manners. The clown can uncrown power. Trump is a clown of the American empire. He is both tyrant and disruptor. His style is gangsterish as well, and the gangster exercise of power allows for a display, ironically, of anti-authoritarianism. well, you might rebel against my story. You might say, Catherine, he is the president of the United States. How can he be the clown and disruptor? He is the power. He is the authority. But this question ignores the fact that politics and culture have been dominated for at least the past 50 to 40 years by liberal authoritarianism, a concept that I've explored at length on Cluanon, my Substack, cluanon.substack.com, where I've been trying to talk about how liberal authoritarianism has just implied consensus agreement with a very, very flawed vision of politics and democracy. So even though the Dems said that they were for democracy, their own processes of choosing presidential candidates is anything but democratic, right? They go against the will of the people. So anyway, the norms of the exercise of American power have entirely subverted by this clownish king. He violates all the codes of respectability, and in that sense, his lack of taste and decorum make him an outsider with a thirst for revenge against a completely bankrupt liberalism that delivered him into power. A couple of years ago, Yanis Varoufakis published a book on the new form of capitalism he called Technofudalism, in which the most powerful capitalists and owner class no longer exploit workers, but instead lease parts of the cloud to techno-peasants. The digital landlords literally own our memories and our love lives, and we pay them each month for access to them. There's one big difference, though, between the techno-peasant and the literal peasant. The peasants had a direct relationship with nature. Their lives were limited by geographical isolation and by the pure military domination of their feudal lords, but peasants could produce the necessities of life from the land itself and the animals they kept. Royal tax collectors from the nobility and the king could extract more payment for protection from the agricultural productivity of the peasantry, but a good harvest, a good flock of sheep, a prosperous season would alleviate the pressure of work on a peasant family. For Marx, the greatest innovation of capitalist forms of production was tearing people away from nature and was driving the peasants off the land where their labor could be bought and sold by time or peace in the factories of northern England. In England and Scotland, enclosure laws drove peasants off the land that had once provided for them, and in the secondary relationship with nature, people were forced to buy food and clothes that they once made for themselves. Marx didn't care for peasants, though, so let's not idealize peasant life. Marx famously described rural life as idiotic. He didn't feel that peasant cunning and self-sufficiency were the grounds upon which to build a better society. He did feel like the working class was, and being organized in the factories, and having a mode of production where we didn't have to slave away and be at the mercy of nature was actually an improvement for the masses. But this ideal of a pre-commodity-based economy provided for the United States, early in the United States, before the coming of the Industrial Revolution, an idea of yeoman independence, Jeffersonian democracy, if you like, that was based perhaps on violently appropriating the fallow land of the allegedly empty spaces of the American wilderness, mountains and prairies, in order to establish for European peasants fleeing feudalism and the establishment of an ideal of free-thinking freeholders and frontiersmen and women who prized their self-sufficiency that was based on their ability to reproduce life for themselves. Well, things didn't work out so smoothly because the people weather interfered and settlers kept getting pushed further and further west where, I just heard about the Oklahoma land run, increasingly this idea of giving me 5 acres and having me farm and having my family be able to reproduce its own needs was exploited by banks and railroads, because if you had a bad harvest, the bank would come and say, well, you're having trouble here with your grain this year, we'll lend you money at 15%. And soon, by the end of the 19th century, this idea of the yeoman and the frontier was completely crushed by banks charging heavy mortgages on the frontiersmen and the railroads charging increasingly high prices on farmers being able to move their grains. So there have been no American peasants. The very idea of the American farmer was that his or her self-sufficiency was going to provide him or her with that kind of like independence of thinking. And there were no American lords. And in the absence of raw physical domination that the European peasantry experienced, we built this country on a series of myths about hard work, frugality, and the self-made man. However, there's an essay, brilliant essays on my Substack by Robert Warshaw that says by the 1930s, the gangster emerges in American popular culture as the refutation of the myth of hard work paying off. That hard work, in fact, did not pay off. In 1929, when the entire economy collapses, you have a gangster in the culture industry who rises because of his ability to commit crime, gains incredible wealth, is always an outsider, Italian or Irish or Jewish American, white ethnic in the teens, 20s, and 30s, wants too much and falls. And the Horatio Alger myth of the 19th century is like, you work really hard, you start from nothing, and then you move up into the middle class. That's the American dream, right? And in 1947, Robert Warshaw was already saying, the gangster is the American tragic hero who works really hard, commits crime, but works hard, goes up, and then falls. And this is like Scarface, Tony Kamada, Tony Montana, both Scarfaces have that trajectory. So the gangster is truly the tragic hero of the American 20th century. His rise and fall allegorize the contradictions of the Horatio Alger myth. His desperate longing to belong to a world that despises him is something that makes him the ultimate outsider, whose impulsivity, vulgarity, and violence are seen as the tragic traits that give him the qualities of the true American everyman. I do not know how far we can take the techno-feudal analogy, but the concentration and collusion of capital and state powers that we have seen in the past 4 decades gives me a sense that what we are seeing is something even more vicious than the aristocratic domination of peasants. Call it gangster capitalism or organized crime. It operates in such a way to destroy the functional parts of the economy that were built by people who believed once in free market entrepreneurialism. Behind all of this and our crushed dreams lies the ideals of democracy and liberalism that today is in tatters. Liberalism is built on the freedom provided by freedom of thought, freedom from want, freedom of superstition, freedom from tyrants, freedom from potentates, freedom from false gods. As the professional managerial class consolidated its status within the liberal state, liberalism itself took on the characteristics of the tyrant and the irrationality it was supposed to depose. The organized criminality of private equity has no glamour. It is destroying our world. Although the gangster as a tragic hero is ultimately someone who tries to be his own boss, this is what every entrepreneur wants. This is the dream that Americans all want. Like, I want to be my own boss. Why? Because it sucks working for someone else. But being your own boss really is scary. The forces of private equity are darkly inexorable in their ability to exploit the weakness of the worker by colluding with the state to destroy public goods, the very ones that are necessary to a functioning democracy. Thank you.
All right, a little discussion time here. So when Catherine was reading through this, what I was thinking about is when Doge first came in and they were like, we're going to move fast and we're going to break things. And what they did is move so fast, by the time you sued them for something they did, they were on to 3 things later. Like a meth-fueled army would go through a small state, take it over, and they were on to the next state by the time anybody knew that they took it over the weekend. So when you look at the gangster capitalism, what do you see as the worst right now? Is it people that are running online stuff where they are just getting a small share, which allows you to buy a luxury yacht? Or is it somebody that just keeps buying out any single competitor, since we are not doing anything whatsoever about monopolies?
They're both
That was
very
a lot.
bad. Yeah. I think one of the things about Silicon Valley is that it has promoted, right now, the bleeding edge of exploitation is AI and the AI bubble. And everyone who's looking for a job right now, everyone who's on, precariously employed is having to deal with this interface. And the other thing about AI is it's another way to attack the worker. Where it's work labor saving, but the aim is to have productivity without workers. Right. Because human beings are very troublesome and workers are troublesome. And the thing that I didn't get into here was that actually what was shown was that when unions organized people and when workers became organized was that workers knew about labor processes and logistics much better than the bosses or the managers, right? And the worker knowledge is something that, since Taylorism, capitalism wants to destroy, because they say that once workers get too uppity, then you have to raise wages. And so within private equity smash and grab of companies, the first thing they do is lay off workers, and the stock of the company goes up because your expenses go down, right? So I think that, you asked me what's worse. I just think that there's an attack on craft knowledge, on work knowledge, on workers and worker conditions. I have students who tell me that there are these apps and they apply for 800 jobs at a time. And the application process is automated, and maybe you get an interview, with 10% of these jobs. And it's so depersonalized now. And this is the gatekeeping that's happening. And then you have Andrew Tate going, just be a hustler. I don't know what, like pimp out some girls, and you can make some money.
You can only sell so much crack. That market floods too.
That's true.
Here's the other question.
The influencer market is very competitive.
And it blows up. So I will tell you, from a person that I had like 40,000 TikTok followers. I just woke up one day and my account was shut down. No warning, no anything. There was no one to apply to. I just had to start over. Yeah, it's crazy. So my other question is, if you can give
this? Did you do this?
I had not done this yet. The famed photo. I don't know what I truthfully have no idea. And yes, I'm a little out there, so I may have cost.
But the managers of TikTok have so much power over you. If that was your living.
Well, and the sad thing is, in Oklahoma, this was the only way to talk to rural Oklahoma. Yep. There's no other way to get through to them, and I could do it through TikTok, and it kind of sucks.
Because there's no media there.
So they've got Oklahoma Farm Report and Fox News. And any place you go eat or anything, it'll be one or the other. Let me ask you one other thing. So you said that most of this with the workers, the changes in management, and she is saying that the managers are usually left of center.
Liberal. That
are comfortable enough where they'll screw over the workers, and then hence in the political sphere, the workers go F you to them and vote the other way, and that's where we got now. But I don't know if it was in a book or a podcast, you said they were tired of being angry at the workers, I think was the term you used, that they were angry with them, they were going to punish them. And that's where this started. Am I accurate on that?
I don't know if it's, it's a terrible thing to look at a bunch of workers who are barely making enough money, and you are being rewarded for keeping their wages down, making their lives shittier. So what's a good way to alleviate your guilt is to say they're backward. They're just not, they're racist, they're sexist, they're like dash phobic. And then suddenly you've got moral superiority. They don't recycle. So suddenly you have a moral superiority over them. And in the past, of course, this existed when the first waves of immigration overwhelmed American cities. The daughters of the American Revolution would go into Italian neighborhoods and give cooking lessons to the young women and say, your mother is cooking with too many fresh vegetables. And,
too much garlic.
Too much garlic, too much tomatoes. And there was this assimilation of the marginal always had to do with like a kind of superiority, a moral superiority, crypto, moral the country is so deeply Protestant, right? Like, and that's the same thing that liberals feel about Trump too, is that there's a style and a display that is just inferior because we're all supposed to be like waspy Brahmin elites who are very discreet and, well behaved. Like, I really feel like Obama was a great avatar of this. He was just so polished, so smooth, right? And, and he looked like he deserved power, right? So there's this kind of discipline of people who are already oppressed, who have nothing, who are living these chaotic lives in these chaotic situations. So you have, my class, especially academics, keep coming up with like crazier and crazier cultural innovations so that they can always be leading the,
like the charge.
The backward people, right? What Hillary called the deplorables, right? But it was actually people who were not credentialed, who are not assimilating into this new form of oppression, where you have superiority not justified, not just by hard work, but by lifestyle. In the 19th century already, like J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie would be like, those workers are just lazy. They're, they speak German or Hungarian or Czech. They deserve to be paid nothing. And the Irish, they can just be sent down as the mines. The Chinese, they don't value life. Like, that's what they would say. Like, we'll just bomb them while they're in the tunnels because they don't value life. Like, there's a way in which the powerful have always made excuses for their poor treatment of the workers. It's just a unique situation since 1977, and a lot of it had to do with the Vietnam War. I mean, we're still, I feel like, paying the price of that breach, where the anti-war, college-educated hippies and counterculturalists just believed that the working class were, pro-war, jingoistic, whereas, and now, looking back on it, when you actually look at the nature of the protests, there was a very, very small proportion of people at Columbia, for instance, who were protesting the Vietnam War. Very small proportion of people at Berkeley were protesting the war. There was a lot of silent resistance to the war among the working class and African American working class, because if you didn't get a college, whatever deferment, you were sending your kids to the war. They just didn't display their anti-war sentiments, by growing their hair out if they were men and, not wearing a bra if they were women. But that kind of cemented in the mind of liberal elites that, the middle of the country were just jingoistic, pro-American military, pro-imperialist. And, in the 30s, there was an idea among intellectuals of the left, at least, that we had to learn from the workers, go out where the workers are, see what they needed, and then by the 70s and 60s, it's like, oh my God, those people, they're just, they just are, the most reactionary. But if you actually looked at what the cultural display was, it's still very, very few counterculturalists who thought they were vanguardists, and like a large number of working class people were opposed to the war, or actually were sort of passively opposed to American imperialism. And you have that same thing today, where a lot of working class people and people in red states are like, we shouldn't be involved in, these imperial adventures abroad. It's actually the Democrats now. Let's go to war. Let's do this. So it's a terrible situation we're in, and yet, if we define it clearly, I think we can see our way out of it. It's just that everyone from the mainstream press on both sides of the aisle, all the pundits, they don't want you to have this language. Why? I won't say this.
That's all right. Let me ask you another question. Okay, so the professional managerial class, is that what Malcolm X was describing as whites that came in to try to help, and they were actually the worst possible thing that could happen?
A lot of those were college kids who came into the ghetto who were helpers. I was always struck by, and I still am struck by, how the PMC elites, they love to help people. And by helping, they objectify the other and say, like, they're passive and they just need to be helped by me. And we have this whole NGO complex. I have two friends in LA who work for the LA homeless healthcare. It's called LA Homeless Healthcare. they don't really want to solve the homeless crisis, because as long as the crisis exists, they can exist. They can keep raising money. They can keep justifying themselves, and it's a very, very disempowering relationship to enter into when you're a working class person or a poor person. You buy into this dialectic where you're like, I need to be helped. And it just makes me so mad when I see all those like NGO pictures of like poor kids, African American kids. It's never Asian American because we're like white adjacent now or whatever. And that makes me even madder because in California there's so many of us. But it's like, oh, we have to like infantilize the poor, make them helpless, make them seem like they need us. And this is in fact like the ethos of progressive politics since the 70s now. There's all those movements where when you see the word awareness, that should trigger in your mind like apolitical, depoliticization, demobilization, like breast cancer awareness month. What does that really mean? You know, like how does awareness actually translate in action? It just means like you give money and you just accept that things will always be the way it is. And who gives the most money? Wealthy people. Allegedly, actually, the rate of giving among the wealthy is much lower than the rate of giving among working class people. But these gestures can be very theatrical. There's a lot of theater of progress and theater of helping.
Okay, let me go into the next subject matter then, because in your book you talked about a museum. Was it in your book or was that a podcast? Which I don't remember which one. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
This is the first book I had to use a dictionary since 5th grade with Sister Rosarita. Only for about 8 words, but I mean, and it was worth it. It's really well written. But what they talked about is there was one large donor, and they had a museum that had been defunded in New York. And this donor goes, well, I'll take care of all that. But the artist whose work was in the museum was somebody that he actually sold actual.
Saatchi.
Right.
Charles Saatchi.
Yeah.
Charles
You want to
Saatchi.
talk about that?
So this actually happened in London. You know, when they had a crisis in the 80s. These what used to be funded by the government was the Tate Modern was in a financial hole, and so Charles Saatchi, who owns Saatchi and Saatchi, this big ad agency, came in and said, you know, I'll bail you out, and here's the program. And you know, I have some really good ideas for the program for next year, and there were all the artists that were in his collection.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's all this new donor relationship is all about increasing the value of your own assets.
Rather than just donating money. You know, because it used to be a plethora of people doing it. And as a smaller and smaller amount end up with more and more, that they're getting more control. Do you want to open it up to questions?
Sure,
or do you
sure.
Okay. Raise your hand if you got a question. I'll bring Mike over.
You said you were going to give us hope. What's the hope? When you began, you were talking about, I think you sort of started in the period of the 60s and said that about 25% of the population or 25% of the workforce was categorized, or you would categorize as a professional class.
College educated, yeah. Or performing a profession where you needed a degree or credential.
Okay, so that was 60s-ish. What is the percentage today?
It's about 30. It's gone up.
So the percentage
30%,
of the
yeah.
workforce that is professionally or certified with a certain credential is 30%.
Yeah, about that,
And
yeah.
typically that's a college educated person.
Yeah, nurses, teachers, people who need to, you know, those are kinds of people, those are professionals, I have lower tier professionals, they don't manage other people.
Right.
So there's a kind of, the professionals were certified in a way as part of the progressive era, because if you were a barber in the West, you could say you were a dentist, right? Because you pulled teeth in 1840, let's say. With the sort of standardization of education, the expansion of higher education, you suddenly you had to meet certain criteria to be able to exercise a profession.
Okay, so I guess my question or curiosity is it the case that everyone within that box that's below the manager level, but is in a somewhat college-educated,
Right.
credentialed field.
Right.
Is it the case that those all? I'm being confused. The manager level is what you're calling the professional class that is
doing the bidding of the capitalist. So what you have with this tier is, like, I could double and triple my salary if I became an administrator at the university.
Right.
So if you are a nurse and suddenly they think you do a good job, if you're a teacher, you can be promoted to principal. Right. If you're a nurse, you can be promoted to nurse manager. And once you do that, you have to execute the administration's will. Like, you have to be willing to cut people. You have to be willing to do more with less. You have to be willing to exercise austerity policies. So some of us just want to do our jobs, right? We just want to do our jobs well. And it used to be that you could have I think that there were fewer rewards for managerialism, and also the middle class wage was stronger. So there are fewer incentives to be chasing the tail of that dragon. Well, now it's like, please, yes, what can I do? I mean, still, despite this, I think that we still have a lot of people with integrity who refuse to do those things. Like right now, with all the doging and all the cuts and all the universities, why doesn't every single chancellor and dean just resign and protest? They're making too much money.
Yeah. Exactly. And the percentage of the rate of that upper class versus the worker bees, it's just
within every strata of income in America, there's increasing polarization. Okay, so you said what do we give hope for? You know what makes me hopeful? Like we can have this conversation now. I feel like a lot of things were obscured by the false dichotomy of liberal, conservative, of everything else. Like I feel like a lot of veils have fallen from the faces of the people, of the allegedly progressive people. I feel like at this moment, like the ideology of work and the American economy is more exposed than ever. It's a lot harder to fool people right now. That's what gives me hope. They're still trying really hard.
Yeah. All right, first of all, welcome to Oklahoma. We have some of the best and some of the worst people in the world here. A pretty high percentage of the best are in this room right now. So, and I mentioned this, we got to meet a couple of nights ago, and that was amazing. And I mentioned this, and nobody at the table believed it, so I had to read it out loud. So it was Mayor Holt, who likes to tout these surveys about how Oklahoma City is the best city in the history of all cities in the universe. And one of the things he said was, one of the chief talking points I use when describing OKC to outsiders is we offer a truly unique combination, cost of living and ease of living in a small town, but with the amenities of the nation's largest cities. Where else can you go to a James Beard award-winning restaurant before catching the NBA champions, all while paying the cost of Salina, Kansas? And so he then says, this week Oklahoma City was officially named the #1 least expensive large city in the United States. But if you go down to the survey, you read a little bit about it, and yeah, we're up there somewhere on it. But then it says the after-tax cost for a professional managerial standard of living. And it was one of the first times I'd heard the phrase, and I looked it up, and essentially it was not the 1%, but the 5%.
Right.
So
it's a city built for, right now, every single amenity in America is built for that class. So of course, it's going to be like, this city's not for 95% of the people. As long as that 5% is happy, the 1% on top of them is going to be making a lot of money. And every single amenity in America is designed for this stratum, this economic stratum. And these people will fight tooth and nail to keep their privileges. And it's not a red or blue issue. They've dominated the Democratic Party, in fact. And so you can see that everything in America is now designed for that income stratum. So that's why Holt can say Oklahoma City is now designed to attract the professional managerial class.
Trying to. Continue to try to.
And our prosperity is measured out.
That's right. and the quality of life, and the whatever's like listicle survey he's cooked up.
Pay $1 billion for a new arena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But our houses are much more expensive than Solana, Kansas.
That's true.
We got one right over here.
So what happens when the king is both the clown and the gangster?
I'm so glad someone asked that
As
question.
an example, I have a lot of friends that want to travel to Venezuela and Nicaragua. And the sort of destruction of USAID for a lot of these other countries and the National Endowment for Democracy is a positive thing for them.
Yeah,
Because it means fewer spooks in their country and other things like that. But here it's a different picture and presented differently. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
What happens when the king is both the clown and the gangster? This is exactly what I've been thinking about. So when I talked about like the veil, when I talked about the veil of ideology falling away, it's like this is the moment when power was revealed. The clownish and gangsterish nature of power is revealed. Because if you think about like how America dominated the world in post-45, like my parents came here thinking it was the greatest place in the world to be. My father often talked about John Foster Dulles and American diplomacy. He really believed in American power. Let's put it that way. He's a guy who believed in power. And now I think it's a lot hard. And the more I learned, because I certainly didn't learn it at school, and even though my father was very pro-CCP, he didn't really want to talk about Latin America. The more you learn about our actions abroad, we are clowns and gangsters. We are true. And, but I want to measure that by saying, like, there are so many good things about America that are not featured, that are not talked about. Because I actually think the idea of the yeoman is a good idea. Like, we can't reproduce everything we need in our homes, but this idea that we make our own, we discuss among ourselves, we come to the best decisions, and we don't bow down before artificial titles and roles. They say that, there was true, the culture of America was truly much more democratic before great wealth was produced by the Industrial Revolution and great exploitation of the slaves through cotton had to go through. Everyone was kind of poor. Everyone had to break the ground and sow the seeds. And, coming from, my husband is German, I come from China, we are much more democratic in the way we deal with people. There's a deep egalitarianism in this country that is deeply admirable. And that has a lot to do with our never having been peasants. And if we could only highlight that rather than our raw domination of Latin America, our hatred of communism and socialism, and if we could say these socialist values, they're actually American values because we are deeply egalitarian people. And we have, the other thing that is really positive about American culture is that we do believe in the dignity of labor. Like when I go to China and I know a lot of really rich Chinese people, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to send you our car. We're going to do this. You do this. You don't have to do that. You don't have to cook. You don't have to do that. You want to shop? No, he's going to do it for you. I'm not comfortable with that. I do everything myself. I'm not saying I'm some kind of, revolutionary hero, but I know that this is part of me as American. If I can walk to a subway station, there's great public transportation in Beijing, why wouldn't I do that? I don't feel great about having somebody's driver come up to pick me up. We believe in the dignity of labor. And my husband comes from a German family. German professors, they do not lift a fucking finger, right? And they don't know how to do, he's different now. They don't know how to do anything at home. If the water heater breaks up, he's like, what? And I don't fix it either. I have to call my friend. But, there's an idea that everything is taken care of for you because you're a great genius or whatever. I hate that. So I think that we have deep egalitarian values in our culture that we should emphasize, not USAID, not cutouts for the CIA, not fake democracy, but a real sense of respect for other people, for the dignity of labor.
I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is, to your point, I think the combination of a clown and a gangster is what you call in wrestling a heel.
Yeah.
And the fact that Linda McMahon is the
Yes.
Secretary of Education,
Yes.
and she made billions of dollars over the last many decades,
Yes.
convincing young to adult American males that what they were seeing on their television that was fake, always had been, always will be, it's like real and worth their passion and conviction. So I think that's kind of, it's just like, drives me crazy every day thinking about who.
But she's the Secretary of
the
Education.
Secretary of-
We
she was
are
here
in
a couple
clown
weeks
world.
ago.
We are in clown world.
Secretary of Education, but with the governor. But sort of a question to build on that is like, do you think that there are, what role do you think education plays in the development of that professional managerial class? And is there, again, like, is there hope? What can we do? Like, what do you think?
Well, you know, the thing about education is that it's becoming hoarded like a luxury. It's increasingly expensive. As the quality of public education deteriorates, private schools hoard the best teachers, the best conditions. I'm not saying they're doing such a great job either, but there is a polarization within education itself. And education as it functions today is a gatekeeper. It's totally corrupted. You cannot have a functioning democracy without an educated polity. But we've made the education, which should be a public good, into a luxury good. And of course people are going to be resentful of that, and they're going to love kayfabe, because the popular culture offers you immediacy. The saddest thing for me is like the fact that everyone accepts that kayfabe, and that somehow caring about learning or difficult things is bad or dorky or you know, makes you a mark, because what we should all be doing is trying to get the easy money. There's a degradation of effort, of actual engagement in the world. The hopeful story about this is that I think the public sphere is so saturated with so much bullshit that maybe it's time to we have to redo everything from the ground up, and we'll find our own ways of creating public education outside of the academy, like, and maybe a podcast, maybe social media, but doing something like this for me is very gratifying, because I'm trapped in a university situation that has been gatekept a lot. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity, and I feel like there's a popular hunger for difficult, complex, critical stories that we can tell each other and ourselves to get to a place where we respect education. You know, we should all be engaged in trying to understand this world, because it's a very complicated place. And what professors have done is be like, well, we just know so much. Like, here we are, just telling you like it is. And I'm just like, no, you don't. Actually, you don't know what's going on either.
So
I've been in academia too long.
your comments about the dignity of labor have me thinking about, and some people call this post-capitalism, but I understand that that's not a common like terminology that people use. That now we're in a phase where people are owning less and less, and they're renting. Like, you don't own your house, you rent a space. You don't own your vehicle, you rent the vehicle. And so you mentioned being able to like repair your water heater, but people don't do that anymore because they're just renting those things. It's all commodified. You don't own the entertainment you have, you just rent those things.
That's right.
And so when I use post-capitalism, that's what I mean. That state where we've gotten people into where they're constantly paying monthly subscription fees.
Yeah, this is rentier capitalism. Like they're just leasing us parts of our money.
Leasing, right? All of these things, right? And so I feel like that's doing a big disservice to the dignity of labor, because you can't fix your commodities, we can't fix our phones, we can't fix our computers, we can't fix anything because we don't own it. If we go into, you take your leased computer's case off, you get these warnings that you're violating your warranty or whatever.
Yeah.
And so
on Kindle, you buy all these books, but they're not really
you don't own
yours.
them, right? Exactly. And so, can you talk about how we're moving towards, or it's to be a thing that you've experienced, that we're moving into this like rental capitalism or post-capitalism or whatever.
Well, this is like rental capitalism. But if in my view, like we shouldn't own any of this stuff. Like I should be able to live in public housing that's cheap and have some. I don't want to fix my own water heater. I don't want to farm my own. I come from 5,000 years of peasants. Like I don't actually want to be a farmer, but I want to be able to pay enough so that farmer has a dignified life. Do you know what I mean? And not be owned. I don't want him to be owned by agribusiness. So what the dignity of labor for me means is that we all have enough. We are compensated enough in our work that we have also a lot of leisure time. And the worker fought for an 8-hour work day and fought for like leisure time outside of work. And now because of our devices too, all of our work is and our play is all captured in these devices. And so I would see there are actually positive things in a non-ownership society. If I don't have to pay so much that I'm always hustling to be able to pay my bills. Like I think a rent control, my ideal world would be like living in a really nice rent controlled apartment where I didn't have to fix everything, but we owned it together. And people who were good at fixing things could fix it for me, but we shared on the burden of other people. I would teach their kids for free. You know what I mean? Like we all have skills and we all share them in that way. And the ownership society that Bush Reagan was talking about was promoting home ownership. That would make people more responsible. Well, we know what happened in 2008. It was all built on, that was all a house of cards too. I think that lending people money to have them buy homes to discipline them and then turning their homes into financial instruments was a great way of exploiting our psychological attachment to our domicile, to the place that we live. So one of the things that I feel like capitalism has really taken away from us, and I don't know if this is speaking to your question or not, is the sense of stability. We're constantly being destabilized in our relationships, in our work, in everyday life, and this adaptation to instability, I think, is so damaging. It doesn't give us any dignity. We're always hustling all the time, but like hustle culture and like the grind set has become an ideal of life. Whereas people died in this country for an 8-hour workday. I asked my students, like, what is the proper use of leisure time? I'm a purposefully nerdy. And they're like, what? What? They don't know. Scrolling my phone. They literally don't understand what leisure time is. Because I know, if you're handy, what if you're really not handy? No, you're okay. I can fix a lot of things I wasn't able to. Yeah.
Sorry. I very much like your qualification of the PMC as like a courtier, because they're the spineless lickspittles of capital, and anybody that's got problems can sort of, they can direct their anger upwards towards them, but not all the way up to the actual holders of power, right? Where there's still this contrast though, where in the feudal ages, right, the actual power is the guy with the shiny hat. There's no question about who's actually in charge. But today, like you were saying, there's this kayfabe where you have this buffoonish gangster in charge and a general political culture of gangsterism. How can you direct people's righteous anger at the actual holders of power when very few people even know who's actually in control?
Right. And even the tech billionaires have gone to kiss Trump's ass, right? In the recent, I'm telling you, like the schoolyard vocabulary of my childhood is just coming back to me in like new ways. Right, and so where is the locus of power? It's totally dematerialized. Why is Mark Zuckerberg going to kiss Trump's ass? I mean, it's very strange actually, because he does have a court. And he is presiding over the exposure of everybody's future to even more grotesque forms of financialization. When he opened up all of your pensions, retirement funds, and 401ks to private equity and private credit. But he is serving, like, it's abstract. The impulse of capital to absorb everyone's labor, to absorb all profits, he's serving that principle. It's like a principle that cannot be broken. And of course the billionaires like it, so they have to go kiss his ass. Like, how do we break that? The Democrats don't have a solution. So I think it's understanding that principle. I'm sorry that I'm being so abstract here. I'm professorial. I don't have a plan for action. I think we have to have the proper critique, proper identification of targets, and then we can take action together. Yeah.
I have a question.
Kayfabe.
Kayfabe it's in professional wrestling. When it's very important. It's where everybody knows it's fake. Everyone knows it's fake, but the fun of it is pretending that it's real. We all get together and act like this is an actual wrestling match between actual wrestlers, even though there's all this theatrics going on. And people compare this very directly to American political culture because everyone knows Donald Trump isn't going to do any of this stuff. They can kind of recognize this is all just highly theatrical and all the actual business is getting done behind the scenes.
Or even more in a more extreme form, every 4 years we have this pretend election where two different opposing powers supposedly vie for our votes, when in fact they all represent the same interest.
It seems to me we have people who refer to capitalism, and what I find disturbing is the lack of definitional clarity as to what capitalism is. And it seems like we are under a system of monopoly capitalism. And this is nothing new. This is was being brought about as early as 1912 when J.P. Morgan made sure that William Howard Taft didn't get reelected. And he got Wilson, who was totally controlled. The process seems to be like what Edward Bernays calls propaganda. And we are heavily propagandized. We are propagandized in our schools. You were talking about the declining efficacy of education in this country. That's on purpose. It's intentional. And they don't want people who think. They don't want people who are critical. They want people who will go along and do what they're told. And unfortunately, we seem to have a professional management class, or as I call them, rich white liberals, who look down upon people, who oppose them, and think they're a bunch of boobs. And they are constantly demeaning others, and they're perpetual virtue signaling. When it is they themselves who have created these problems, and a lot of this has been carried out using the Hegelian dialectic. They created the problem, and they're waiting for the reaction, and they always propose the solution that gets them further down the road. And it's not until the people in this country start to wake up and figure out who is really pulling the strings and what the cost, the enormous cost, has been to allow them to continue to pull these strings. Thank you.
Thanks. No, I agree. There's a kind of, I've been thinking recently about abundance and the consolidation of powers and the arguments for deregulation and abundance. And one of the things that Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein say is that we should have more competition, we'd have more abundance, and the Democrats should be into that. But what you say is true, that what we actually have is more and more consolidation of capital. And more consolidation of capital actually kills competition. Competition was supposed to be the ideal in capitalist society, where if we had competing producers of certain objects, they would keep getting better and better. We have less and less competition these days. We are in such a static mode of being, and I don't want to be like a tanky or something, but when I go to China or when I go to Asia, the barrier of entry to producing things is much lower. So from every single product that you see or every single food service you have, there's just a lot more variety. There's actually more functioning competition. And I wish that the Democrats could actually say that by the very Democrat, I don't care about that, but I wish there was a progressive argument that could be made for the fact that we are not even honoring the principles of liberalism or free markets that undergird real competitive capitalism. That we have betrayed those very standards, and we are in an oligarchical, a monopolistic world where things get shittier, but we pay more for them.
I have a question. So, on that subject there, unbridled capitalism has destroyed capitalism.
That's right.
Unbridled free speech without any kind of regulation will kill our free speech. We had a thing called the Fairness Doctrine. I just kind of learned about this, and I started studying about it at J6 because I was like, what happened? I never thought that would happen here. But if you only hear one side for the last 40 years, then that's exactly, and that's another reason. Like capitalism we need like seatbelt laws for capitalism. We need a balance of, I mean, if you went to like some churches and said that you were a Marxist, you would be strung up.
I know. I had a near-stream experience on Sunday. But yes, I know. Look how nice I am. I'm not hurting you.
And the same thing with socialism.
I know.
Jesus would have been considered a socialist today.
That's a lie.
No. You know what? The thing is that I have a flexible and open mind. I'm not dogmatic, right? But I like to hold people to their principles. Like, if you really believe in freedom, do you think people are free in this country? No. And yet, what is the thing that's enslaving us? The economy, and number one would be healthcare costs, right? And also, like, do you think that a free society should adjudicate all wrongs through the courts rather than a democratic system of deliberation? It's not right. We are so the only instruments people have against private equity are suing them. That's not good. That's not going to bring them in. These people have infinite budgets for lawyers, and if your family was harmed by a private equity owned hospital or nursing home, your family member is dead, and you're going to sue for damages from Steven Schwarzman, who's worth like close, $600 billion. It doesn't matter to him. It doesn't hurt him. We need structural change so deep that every person feels like they have a stake in the outcome of the economy. And I would just feel like, I can't believe, why didn't the Democrats make the argument that actually having universal single payer would lessen the cost of employment for employers? One of the reasons why small businesses go under in America now is because of the cost of employment. Like, these are basic fucking issues that you can talk to people about. They don't want to get there because they are in the pockets of big pharma and big insurance. And it's really frustrating, but I also think like the veil has been lifted. Like the kings of liberalism and MAGA have been uncrowned. We are exposed. Now what? Is the question.
I was going to say I watched the Michael Moore movie about Where Do We Invade Next or whatever it was, and he cherry picked various countries in Europe and said how they've been successful at kind of socializing and creating things. But then I heard what you said about Germany, so then I thought, well, maybe it's not that great. But I just think that I feel like we have the opportunity here, and we're just not taking advantage of it. I want to make one point about the Epstein deal that's going on right now. The one time that MAGA and us come together is recognizing how many big, producers and all the people in charge up there could be exposed at this point, and we could see, including J.P. Morgan and Jamie Dimon and all of them are now being scrutinized. What role they play?
This is what I want to say about like scandals like this. what happens the day after?
I know.
That's really important. Like, you expose it, you think it's going to be some kind of biblical revelation, God will come down and punish them. No. What happens the day after?
It's nice though that we merged there.
Yeah. No, I know. We want divine justice.
That's kind of where my question was going. Like, where do you see it going after the post-Trump era? Because you're talking about lifting the veil, and it's kind of like maybe we lifted it a little too strongly, and it was a little too ugly under that veil. And I kind of see like the pendulum swinging back towards maybe something like, Gavin Newsom's like a rising star kind of right now. So it's kind of like, I see it potentially just swinging back that way. And there's also kind of a notion of like.
And then we're just caught in the stasis where we swing back and forth.
I mean, there's also like, my parents were immigrants. We're basically striving to become the PMC. It's kind of like, what I've been programmed to from birth.
Yeah.
You have just any thoughts on that, basically?
Oh, for the immigrant kids? When the American dream was functional, like the whole idea is you climb the ladder. And now the ladders are all gone. But I do think that there's a way in which the motivation for working hard to advance oneself in relation to satisfy one's parents should be differentiated from our love of work itself, for its own sake, or for understanding the world, or for transmitting like a kind of historical sensibility and knowledge, or skills, just a set of skills that we can acquire. I think that for immigrant kids especially, it's very hard to separate, like, what is the motivation? This is where I guess where I am a liberal. What is your autonomous motivation? What is it, the thing that you're trying to do to satisfy your parents? And they say that that's also what keeps America conservative too, is that sorry, Marco, but this is may fuck you up more, is that all these new waves of immigrants believe in the American dream, even as native-born Americans are disillusioned by it. And if you stop that immigration, then what will happen? You'll have more disillusioned people. Because, by in the teens, 20s, and 30s, you had white ethnics come in. 1800s, it was German. 19th century was a lot of German, also Irish. And then, starting from the 60s onward, it was Asian and Latin American. Like, we keep driving that dream. Now, if you stop it, and the kids understand this dream has been, we've been sold a lie, then how can we change society? Like, manga's shooting itself its own foot right now because of that. Because you can still sell that dream, maybe. I mean, actually, I don't even know now. But you can still sell that dream in some very poor parts of the world. Here's a place where it's an even playing field. Here's a place where your children can advance. Here's a place of equality and dignity. Like, I think a lot of working class people come to America because they think, here my work will be valued. When I'm home, people look down on me. And that's been a driving motivator for economic growth, for, the country that we know, right? And, okay. All right.
You're okay.
You talked about, being based on principle, holding people to their principle. You talked about this idea of the peasantry, or what I might call the indigenous people of the land. I see capitalism more like colonialism, this abstraction away of the people, away from the land. It's like when colonists come in, the first thing they do is remove the language, remove the traditions, remove the culture, and to divorce people from the land so that they can kind of implant this abstract idea of what an economy should be and what a society should be. And with that in mind, do you think, like in Oklahoma, we have tribal governments that control a lot of things right now, a lot of casinos, but they do have a connection to their people and a principle to their people that they can't really escape from, even if they become somewhat corrupt. I mean, I'm sure there's some corruption in there. Do you think there's any role for indigenous governments like that to help change things?
On a macro scale, maybe, but I really believe in the benefits of good industrialization. Like, people should be freed from their submission to the forces of nature. This is one of the things that Marx said about, it was terrible to push all the peasants off the land. They were in these terrible factories, but then they looked around, they saw workers around them. And whereas they were working, each individual farmer in their homes, unable to understand how many of them there were compared with the Lord, there is, not the Lord of that, but the feudal Lord, there are people who are like me, who are in my position, and that's the grounding of class consciousness, which is actually in the factory, right? And I come from people very attached to their land. I'm not, the Chinese peasantry. I mean, the word "tu" is like in every, in all the sayings. But I feel like that can also like revert back to a kind of parochialism, provincialism, and nationalism. And actually, blood and soil is the origin of Nazism. Like we come from this land, and therefore we belong here, and we need, we have a purity of vision. I really believe in like pluralistic democracy in a way, functioning, not bullshit democracy, but like how we can get to forms of self-governance that maybe welcome. Cause I'm also an immigrant too, right? So like number one out the door would be me, right? But do I belong to this land? I feel like I belong to America. I feel like I'm as American as fucking J.D. Vance. No charges are with me. Like, do Americanisms, do America. I'll do America with against J.D. Vance. I feel like it's good to have mixing too. There's a positive aspect. This comes from the European Enlightenment, which is a period of colonialization too, of cosmopolitanism. Like it's good to know the world. We are all children of the cosmos, and we can travel the world. I think there's got to be a good balance between, a kind of indigeneity and also a kind of cosmopolitanism.
So is there an appropriate tension there?
Yeah, and the colonialism doesn't have to be, and cosmopolitanism doesn't have to be colonialism. I really believe. I mean, you're talking to an immigrant here, so it's like, I the first time in my life, I felt like I was in danger of being denaturalized this year. Seriously, like I don't feel in danger in Oklahoma, but I was like, I was naturalized like many years ago, but that suddenly can be taken away from me. And that would be taking away my American identity. I can't suddenly go be Chinese. I understand Chineseness, but I can't suddenly go be like Chinese again. It would really, and then all these people are leaving America because they're like, oh my God, it's so horrible, I'm moving to Europe. I'm like, that's a real privilege. That's like, just taking yourself. This is our country. Like, we need to figure out the good and the bad of it and sort it out here. And Trump, for all of his negative qualities, is an American. Like, when he was first elected, I felt like the bully in my schoolyard was elected president. I was like, oh God, I know that guy.
Okay, my question kind of piggybacks a little on is that, do you think part of the reason that the PMC has become more removed from the working class and their interests is that there is less social mobility today, and so the means of social mobility, like education, are so expensive and gate-kept that you have fewer members of PMC that have come from that working class background that have those frames of reference and bring a diversity of viewpoints to the PMC.
Well, you know what? I would say one of the demographic groups that's really responded to this book are people who are socially mobile, like me, like come from families that there was a parent who didn't go to college, and then they come in and they're disillusioned by this world. Like, they work so hard, they get in, and they realize, this is what you promised me. So that is not a direct answer to your question, but this is an answer to the previous question about OKC, is that their economic segregation in America is more extreme than it was when I was growing up. You have very little chance of living next to a person of a different class than you did in America. Now, then in the 70s, 50s, 60s, the neighborhoods were much more mixed. And this is by design because of speculative real estate and because of real estate value. But we're managing America in an urban, suburban, I'm not sure what's happening. We're abandoning rural America, basically. We're managing America so that people of a class live together and have no contact with people of the working class except as service workers. This is shown, like, when I was growing up in America, I grew up in a suburb of New York City called Mount Vernon. There were people of all different professions and race, African Americans on my block. There was a lawyer, there was like a restaurant guy, there was a doctor, there were working class people whose families had been there for a long time. That is all gone. That is all gone. And if there are mixed neighborhoods, they are all being gentrified, or they're being abandoned to sort of the working class. So when you have class segregation like this in the physical environment, which is where I call there's housing built with amenities and housing that is completely degraded, you have no contact with people.
Or gated.
I come from the land of gated communities. Yep. You have to keep people out.
Thank you, Steve Hunt, for bringing Catherine here.
There you go.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Where is he? Thanks so much, Steve.
He was right up over
in the back. Yes, thank you so much, Steve.
We're running into 8 o'clock, so she's going to do a few closing remarks, if you don't mind. If you want to get your book signed, we're going to do them up here.
Let's just do one last question now.
Okay, then one last question. Somebody.
Just one last
question. I just wanted to point out that today is Bernie Sanders' birthday.
That's right. Anybody, one last question? All right, then you got to do closing remarks.
Oh, no. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve, for bringing me out here. Thank you, Steve.
I will say, how do you think that we deal with infighting and sort of purity tests in spaces like this? I feel like a lot of times people are hesitant to speak up because they don't want to get shouted down. And I feel like you might have experienced some of that and might be able to speak on it.
Oh, I don't have any solutions for that, but I feel like identifying the culture of the purity test on the liberal left is really necessary right now. I mean, there's this whole thing about, this is what I talk about in terms of liberal authoritarianism. The thought conformity on the liberal left progressive elites comes from the top down. So I don't know how you can test it in an interpersonal way, because sometimes people's social networks are dependent on this. You want to be involved. But I would urge every single person to remain open-minded, skeptical, and sharp, and not assume that people agree with you. And that is actually a good, to be in a room with differing points of view. There's so much purity testing and virtue signaling and conformity. Can I just give you an example? And I tried to be gentle about this. I can't say that I was very good at it, but I'm on a listserv of California Scholars for Academic Freedom, right? We have very, very serious issues because they've been firing academics who take pro-Palestine positions, and everyone's like talking, and then someone says, what about flying domestically? I'm really worried about that. I mean, flying internationally, we know how to clear our phones of social media, but what about flying domestically? And someone pipes in and goes, what's really good for the world is if you don't fly at all. And I was like, what? Like, people are dying, and this is what you're going to virtue signal this? So all I did was I'm not saying it was very good because I had to shut up the list after this, but I go, can we please on the left not try to take things away from people? I urge you all to read my friend's book, Climate Change as Class War. We have to stop taking things away from people and showing people what's possible, right? And that was the bad part about it, was that I had to mute the rest of it because there was like a huge discussion afterwards, and I was like, no, I can't handle it. But just using gentle, reasonable arguments, and then if it goes toxic, just walk away because it's not worth it to belong to that group. I mean, here's what I wanted to do, which was just to completely troll them and go, as an immigrant woman, do you want me never to see my family again? Like that. And then, I said to my husband, should I do that? And he goes, no, don't do that. I'm sorry. But I just try to use like reasonable arguments. Matt Huber's book about how the climate movement portrays like working class people is right there, and I like put a link to the book.
All right, you are
That's
awesome,
it.
Catherine
Thank
Liu.
you.
Thank you. And once again, if you want to get your book signed, come on up here. One more time. Well, let's give her another hand before you go. Great job. You are. All right.